Welcome to another Cuke Audio phone chat. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita and Feline Cuchita, and soon, we hope, the lovely dear Katrinka. We hope that you and yours are safe and comfortable and not suffering any economic hardship and able to get out and do whatever you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Today our guest is Danny Parker. He's a Zen Priest in Florida who studied at the San Francisco Zen Center and got dharma transmission from Ed Brown. And he's got a pretty interesting story that sort of wanders around a bit, and by the time you get to the end, it's pretty amazing everything he's done and is continuing to do. And one thing he's done rather recently is edited 2 books of Ed Brown's lectures. One of them is already published as The Most Important Point. So we'll get right into the phone chat with Danny after pause to meditate. So when you hear the bell, if you wish, you may hit pause and meditate, do zazen, TM, chant, do nothing, just sit there. Hey, that's what zazen is. Whatever you want, or not. And when you're through, hit unpause, and we'll hit the bell to end the meditation period and go right into our phone chat with Danny Parker.
Hi, David.
Danny, hello, hello. How are you?
Good evening. I'm well. I'm well tonight.
Good, good. Hey, can I
Yes,
record this?
of course.
I'll tell you why. Just in case we say anything that's cool, I want to throw on a podcast. So what's happening?
Just finished supper here, and I'm looking at the beautiful sky after dinner, and Lisa and Sarah are sitting talking around the table, so I just moved out to the yard so I can be with the kitty. So.
And you're in Florida, and it's still daylight.
Yes, but the sun is setting. I'll send you a picture of it after we're off the phone.
Good. And at that point, Danny and I proceeded to talk for, 25 minutes on various vital subjects that I'm going to spare you and pick up at... Okay, Danny, that was good. We had a health and safety discussion.
Well, no, these things, we're talking about your arm or your hand or those two guys cut off heads. This is the end of your life. So it's a serious business.
Yeah.
So,
oh, Wow. Oh, God. Yeah, see, I just cringe thinking of work accidents and close calls and stuff. But anyway, hey, we're here now. We've made it this far.
We have.
And you, my God, Ed and I talked about you.
I was on the Ed channel for years to write that book, which is going to be books. There's another book yet, because when the publisher said, oh, we love this thing, it's perfect. The editor is so delighted because she doesn't have to work hardly in it at all. But we have one bad piece of news. It's almost exactly twice too long. And we can't publish this way. It's too long. So we'll give you 2 weeks to cut it to the length that we need, which I can't remember the word count, but they told me that. And they said, we'll give you 2 weeks to figure it out because we don't know how we would do that. I said, me neither, but I can. What about you give me 20 minutes and I'll come back with it? They said, what? I said, so I just used Word and it counts words. And I went to the section that ended with your word count and I went, pow, and I cut it right there. And there's another book.
That's good. That's good.
But anyway,
that's great.
I will listen to the talk that with Ed. But like I said, I was on the Ed channel for years, listening to all his talks. So, although I love listening to him, I still go back to it because. And there's one talk that's not in the books that needs to be there, but I need to get it transcribed. So, and the second book has got a bunch of talks that I've never heard before. One that I talked to him about this. I said, Ed, and I personally never heard you give this talk, and I'm kind of surprised that I never heard you give this talk. And he didn't really have much to say about it. I think it's because it was so embarrassing. So he has a lot of. Well,
that's Ed, man. That's Ed.
He has a lot of embarrassing.
He lays
stuff.
it all out, huh?
Yeah, this one's about, and you'll know the story, which is he was let go from the kitchen. Basically Suzuki Roshi told him, you're going to have a new assignment. You're going to work with me, working on digging up stones and then building a wall. Yeah. So we're going to give you a break from that. You're not going to do that for a while. And Ed wasn't very happy with that, obviously. But anyway, there's the reasons, and we won't get into those. But anyway, he was with Suzuki, and Suzuki said, this looks like a nice rock. Let's dig this one out. It'd be great to have this one. So they worked for like 2 days on this stone rock boulder to get it out of the ground. And Ed said that about on the 4th hour on the second day, it became kind of clear to him, like, hey, is this going to end anywhere? Because this looks like this boulder is just going straight down to the center of the earth or something. It's like an oblong, huge thing. And then, and I don't know how this will fit, even if we got it out. And then towards the end of the second day, Suzuki said to him, I don't think this stone's going to work. Let's do something else. And I guess Ed said that he had like the biggest internal fit of his life, and yet he's been prone to fits. But that's
right.
You know him, so he's prone to fits. I mean, terrible ones. But he was with Suzuki, and he had an internal fit because he wasn't going to express that fit to Suzuki, and he said that then he walked away because he just couldn't contain himself, and he started cursing under his breath and said, God damn it, motherfucker, we knew that this thing was way too big at the end of work yesterday. This is never going to work. What a stupid thing, and whatever. And he said, then he looked over in the distance and he saw Suzuki, and he was already working on something else. And he said that, and I said, that's such a beautiful story because it's basically telling you that regardless of whatever your frustration with whatever goes wrong, that it doesn't really, you can stick with it if you want and suffer with it more if you feel like you got to do it or you're justified. But really, Suzuki just gave up on the rock. That rock's done, going on to something else. So anyway, this is a beautiful story, and it's in the second book. There's some really neat stories in it too. But I love listening to Ed. We'll have a competition.
First, when you mention book, please say the names of the books.
So the book is that I'm still quite happy with is the book that we distilled of Ed's talks. It's called The Most Important Point, and it's actually half of the book that was written and composed over a period of about 5 years. And the other book that's not published yet, the working title is See What You Can Find Out. And since my health is in a wacko condition these days, I don't really know what's happening too far ahead. So I sent that to my literary agent and told her, listen, you've got this thing. Here it is. In a year, let's start shopping it around. But it's To See What You Can Find Out. It's the working title for that one. And I think the first book's selling okay, and it's got some really nice reviews, and it's gotten some really nice reactions from people. So it's one of those projects that I've worked on where I'm just completely happy with it. And there's some beautiful things in it. I was just sharing with my daughter recently a poem that's in it by Robert Bly called One Source of Bad Information that she was so impressed with, and I was impressed with it too. So if I can find that,
Yeah.
I'll share it with you. Do you know this poem?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe or maybe not.
Are you looking for it now?
I'll find it.
Are you?
Yeah, it's called One Source of Bad Information. So anyway, but I'm really pleased with having worked on this book and being able to share that with other people because, having done this practice myself for a while, you decide, well, how do I communicate this to people in some way? Anyway, here's one source of bad information. Yeah. There's a boy in you about 3 years old who hasn't learned a thing for 30,000 years. Sometimes it's a girl. This child had to make up its mind how to save you from death. He said things like, stay home, avoid elevators, eat only elk. You live with this child, but you don't know it. You're at the office, yes, but you live with this boy. At night, he's uninformed, but he does want to save your life, and he has. Because of this boy, you've survived a lot. He's got 6 big ideas. 5 don't work. Right now, he's repeating them to you. So that's the poem by Robert Bly.
Oh, that is
great. One Source of Bad Information.
That is great.
So that's in a chapter in the book called Zen and Being with Early Childhood Trauma. And everybody, we all have, as Ed says, we all have scars and damage because life's pretty tough for living beings, so here on the great planet Earth. And so, I don't think no one escapes unscathed. So, but then you have the way of how you gonna deal with that damage and what's it gonna be like, and are you going to accumulate more? So when Ed couldn't take it that they were going to give up on that rock and they should have known better, sometimes we just have to cut our losses and say, well, it's too bad, isn't it? That that didn't work out. But we'll
Well,
go.
and
You know,
that doesn't have to be. That's not the only response.
yeah, there's other.
I personally, I don't think I would have cared.
Mm, hey, that's great.
Uh, Suzuki did that sort of thing a number of times. That isn't the only big stone he got people working on that was impossible to get out. There was one really enormous one that was ridiculous. That I mean, he had to have. He knew stones. He had to have known it couldn't come out. Um, but I don't know. I would have been just happy to be there, and I wouldn't have cared.
Well, you see, that's maybe that's why I've been with Ed, because I would be the type of person where I would have struggled some with that. But on the other hand, I love Ed, but I'm not Ed, so I can, well, as I've aged too, and as I've done this practice, as you do this practice, it gets easier for you to drop things like that, because it's just, you can. But we all have tendencies. Some of it's like the wiring that we were born with from our mommy and daddy, and so it's just what we've got. And then there's our upbringing. But
Yeah.
but you're lucky if some types of people, if they can just not be fazed or bothered by that. That's pretty nice. And sometimes I'm like that, but I'm not that often. So I would say, yeah, that's probably why Ed and I see a lot of things eye to eye in some way. I don't, I have some unique problems he doesn't have, and he definitely has some problems I don't have, and but
Yeah.
so, but we, in some ways, whatever is wrong with us, in some ways, is the most beautiful thing if we can figure out how to survive with it and still carry on gracefully. And that's a huge deal. And my wife, Lisa, says, I'm really kind of concerned about this, how much you love me, because you love broken things so much.
Hey,
So,
hang on. Hang on. I've got somebody at the door.
yes.
It's going to take a minute. All right.
Good. I'll take a short break.
All right. Hey, so where were we? Oh yeah, oh yeah, talking about all that. Well, hey, I want to go back to the stone. I said I wouldn't have been bothered. Of course, I don't know, but I think I might have been likely to argue with him while he was doing it. I would say, wait a minute here.
Yeah, Ed
Are
didn't
you
do
sure
that.
you wanted? This is impossible. And he would have said, "Shut up" to me, and then I would have given up.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, yeah. Anyway, I remember I can think of some other Ed frustration stories, but I don't think it's fair to tell them.
Probably not. I mean, like that one, I heard that talk and I talked to him about it, and I said, I think this is really an important talk. And he was just
Uh-huh.
absolutely silent, because I could tell, I hit a nerve, that this was an embarrassing story, because the embarrassment wasn't the stone so much as he knew the score, because he had been taken out of the kitchen because this wasn't working out. And uh, and then the idea,
Well,
then you move to work directly with Suzuki, and you have trouble with that too. So
uh-huh. Well,
so
that's
but
all right. That being moved out of the kitchen is no big deal. There's people are rotated there. Uh,
of course.
Ed was in charge of the kitchen plenty. He was in charge of the kitchen the first 2 years. I don't know. I can distinctly remember working with him because I ran the dining room. Uh, but I don't remember exactly how long. Maybe only the first year. But you know what happens is people get jobs or positions at Zen Center, and they start thinking of it as theirs. This includes being abbot.
Oh.
And my motto for Zen Center was, what Zen Center giveth, Zen Center taketh away. And I saw many people upset about being moved from one position to another. And now sometimes, that they'd want somebody to stay on longer because it was really working well. So somebody might stay in some job for, and there's some things like Wendy running the garden at Green Gulch and Peter the Fields that went on a long time. And at some point, it was suggested it's time to change those. And that was a big, big deal. It was like taking their private garden and field away from them, you know. And it was upsetting, you know. But that's what happens. That's what happens with institutions.
Well, yeah.
And
I mean, I think Ed, and still to this day, we put our ego somewhere. It's going to live somewhere. Or maybe it doesn't, but there are not many people I've met where it's not living anywhere. But Ed's, cooking and food, it lives there pretty strongly, and, it's tough for him. So last year at exactly this time, we were in Scheibs, Austria doing a retreat, and I like to go to those to be in them because I get a lot of benefit from doing more zazen and being in retreats and being with him, and it's just lovely. But also too, I know when I'm there I can help because I can talk to the people in the retreat when he's not around and say.
You're saying this because you speak German.
Well, no, the Austrians there usually they speak English. My German is too bad, but I can communicate a little bit, but most of them speak English. But anyway,
yeah.
I was able to tell them, listen, I'm going to give you some signals now, and I want you to turn your ears on and really hear what I'm going to tell you. And I'll ask for them to nod. So nod to show that, because there are a few people that are being translated to in Auf Deutsch. I said, nod when you know that you're hearing me and that you need to listen to what I'm going to say next. And I'd wait for everyone to nod. Then I'd say, I've got this bell, and I'll have it in the kitchen. And when I tap this bell, some of the time it'll mean that this is a silence break where we're going to take just a break and we're going to be mindful and notice what's going on. But most of the time, this is a bell that means be quiet, please stop talking, and please pay careful attention to what's going on. So stop immediately from talking and immediately pay attention to what's going on. And so then I get everybody to agree to that, and then they nod. And then I said, okay, here's the second thing, and this is pretty much it. This is all I have to tell you. And I said, the second thing is, regardless of what happens in terms of you feeling like you're not doing well enough or you're being criticized or something else is wrong, that you feel like, you're not doing well, or, the other thing I have to tell you is don't take it personally. And then I asked for them to nod again. Do you understand this? Yes. Okay. I said, well, okay, good. The two things that are really important. And, you'll see why I'm telling you this later as we go through our 4 or 5 days. So, and invariably, we use the bell a lot. And towards the end of the retreat, people start, they just smile and a little bit of light laughter when hit the bell because they know, boom, I need to stop whatever you're doing. Stop. It's just like that the game where your musical chairs, you're running around. It's like you stop right away and you pay attention, and that becomes kind of a fun, in some ways, kind of a fun game with a group where you're practicing together because everyone's like you learn to turn on a dime, which is, I think Zen has kind of this quality, especially because this idea of what I would call a bouncy quality, where you're going and you're paying attention and it's smooth and you're quiet and you're with whatever's going on, or bang, you're going to change speed and you're going to change what you're doing and you're going to change right now. You're not going to wait. And whatever your complaints about, I need to finish this now, they need to go away. So anyway, but with the group, I was with him in Shibes, and it was just so sweet, and we had such a nice time. But he's, his ego, he's really invested himself in cooking and Tensio Kyokun. And I love this text. It's such a wonderful teaching, such a marvelous text. And, in my mind, kind of everything's there if you want to pay attention to it. So, so he's like that. And he does have things to teach. So if he's doing a cooking class, then if you pay attention, you'll learn something. If you don't pay attention, you may or may not. So anyway, that's kind of big talk about that.
Yeah.
But this idea of being able to turn on a dime, we have a spring and fall retreat here in Florida, and so I work hard.
Who's we?
My little sangha here in
What's the name
Florida.
of your sangha?
Well, it doesn't really formally have a name, but it's kind of like Peaceful Sea Sangha South, something like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then we have in Italy, there's another little sangha I have called the Sangha of the Peaceful Lake in Lago Maggiore. And believe it or not, I'm sitting with those people every day on Zoom at 18:30 hours in Italy, which is 12:30 here, which would be, goodness, it'd be 12:30 at night for you, wouldn't it? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
12:30 noon for you is 12:30 at night for me.
Yeah. So we sit every day. I sit with those people. And so there's a sangha of about 10 or 12 people there. So, but anyway, I'm getting off the subject. But this is so surprising. This is so surprising how I've ended up with a sangha now in Italy. It's so bizarre. But I can come back to that. But anyway, my little sangha here, I work within the practice. We have like a Zen and cooking workshop with Kathy Egan that's typically done over 3 or 4 days.
Oh yeah, I know her. Sure, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's absolutely stupendous, and she's kind of like a stealth Zen person.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, she is. She's stealth. The more you're around her, the more you realize, something is going on with this person. But anyway, I work to try to add that quality of being able to turn on a dime in terms of what you're doing in the practice in the retreat too, because everyone will say, "Oh, this kin of walking so slowly and getting used to just kind of like being with things and being intimate, walking slowly." I said, "That's nice, you like that, but then boom, we need to change the cadence and walk really fast now." And so we'll walk slowly for one loop of the backyard I have here. And then at some point it hit the clackers and it's like, then we're going to walk really fast. And please keep up with the person in front of you and they're walking quickly if you have problems with your knees or some other reason why you shouldn't be walking fast, and just move out and move at whatever speed you feel is right for you. But anyway, and then we'll go back to slow. So I like this idea of, and the same in kitchen work too, or anything, there's a lot of advantages in life to being able to maintain your flexibility in terms of changing to circumstance and not becoming too attached to one way of doing it or another. In the fast way, you have vigor. You're saying, like, I'm putting vigor into my awareness and my activity. When you're doing the slow one, it's like, I'm putting intensity and depth. to my perception if I can, and I'm noticing what the mind is doing. So, so anyway, and then in terms of to go back to how the acted, I end up with a little Italian Sangha is for years now, starting in 2014, I met this man out at a conference at Pacific Grove, California, because I'm an energy guy. I study energy use in buildings and have for my entire career, starting from like 1978 or something. And
career of what? Career
studying
of what?
energy use in buildings and how to make it really low, how to make it really
but
small.
For what's your career?
Well, I work at the Florida Solar Energy Center now, which is part of the University of Central Florida. And but I've worked other places. But I've been here for a long time, and it's marvelous because I love studying buildings and how buildings work and how buildings are heated and cooled and how the equipment works in buildings. And I like machines, and in fact, I tell people I love machines, and you know, and I think they love me back too. So that's the other thing, you know, when you love
What's
something.
your job description? I mean, what do you do?
I'm a principal research scientist. Is the job. Sounds very lofty. At the Florida Solar Energy Center, where I study low energy buildings and zero energy buildings. That would be the short description. But anyway, I met a guy who worked at the Joint Research Center for the European Commission. We have national labs in the U.S., and it's like the national lab for energy and for the European Commission, and it's in Ispra, Italy. And I met him, and I presented some stuff we were doing on looking at how would you make houses so they use so little energy and yet did all the stuff that we want to do in modern life, and yet they didn't have any real impact on the electric grid. How could you do that? And I presented that you would do that across climates in the U.S., and some are very challenging. Florida's not very hard, but Valley wouldn't be very hard, but Michigan's hard. But anyway, he said, that's so interesting. We have a young PhD student we've hired, and she's been there for like 9 months. And that's kind of like what she's supposed to do, is figure out how to do this in Europe. But no one knows what to tell her what to do. Is there any way that you think you could help communicate that to her? I said, sure, you know, we could do that. He said, well, why don't I take you over there to come there and see if you can help. And I'll bring you over for 10 days or 2 weeks. And so they did. They brought me over, and I met her, and sure enough, she was discouraged. She was young, and very smart, intelligent woman, very driven. But she was thinking of quitting because, if you sit at a desk and no one can tell you what to do, and you're just reading a lot of stuff that, maybe that's okay. But, she thought she was doing a job. And so anyway, I met her, and soon after I met her, I said, I'm going to show you how to do what they want you to do, or are you interested in doing this? And I described it to her, and she said, sure, I would love to learn how to do this. So I said, well, okay, put your work hat on because we're going to work. And so we did. We worked for like a couple of weeks, and I showed her how to do some of these things, and she picked it up really fast, really smart young woman. And before I left, we had this beautiful meeting at a pizzeria or something, and I said that we're going to figure this out, and you're going to have things are really going to work out. So this is really going to work out for you career wise, I think. But later on there could be problems. But I said, don't worry about that now. But anyway, for the going away dinner, they took me to this nice place in Milan, and some other colleagues of hers, they said, we really like spending time with you. That's why we asked to come on this dinner. We really like you, but we found out things about you. We found that you're a Zen guy. And they said, do you do this? I said, yes, I've done this since like 1974. And they said, well, do you think you could teach us how to do that? And I said, of course. We could teach you how to do that. So now at the Joint Research Center for the European Commission, for the Energy Division, they have a building that's available on Fridays where people sit zazen. There's like 10 people who come, and there's a person who leads it. And but anyway, during the pandemic, she leads it from Italy, and then she strikes the bell 3 times, and then I have an echo bell that I boom, boom, boom that I do here. That goes across the water, and then we do the same final bell at the end of it. And so now for years now, I've had retreats and practice and so forth with those people. So that's been a wonderful thing. And then the young woman, she received like this prestigious award from the European Commission for Best Young Researcher, and there was a huge award ceremony at a conference and so forth. And so that's really worked out for her, and so she's really happy. But then she did have the other problem that I had warned her about, which is jealousy. That can happen. But she said, I said, well, you have to, it's just like the rock, you have to decide there's some things you're just going to ignore because it's not going to make things better. But since you're dealing with people and jealousy is coming from them, an easy way to help with that is, you help them. You pay it back, like the way it's worked out well for you that I've done for you, you do for them, you help them. And then things will slowly change. So anyway, like I said, I'm really rambling tonight, but it's been fun.
Good.
Yeah. So I'm a pretty lucky person, and to have I'd say I do tell people this, and it's a story now, so I repeat it, but it's a story I like, which is other than being born and having this family and so forth. Having run into Zen practices, the best thing that's happened to me, because it affects everything, absolutely everything. And there's no end to it. There will be an end to it. And I told Ed, let's just fall out of the saddle. That's a good way of doing it. So, because there seems to be no reason to stop. Although I would say this, that, the full moon ceremony, those things are pretty hard these days to do all those bows. But I don't know if I could do a practice period anymore. That's all right. I don't think so. So, but then again, you don't know what you can do. And I don't think my life has this in the cards for me anyway. I'm just happy to be surviving. This is back to the chainsaw. I'm happy to be surviving at this point. With this August is 10 years since I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And, when I looked at Google, which existed even then, it said your average life expectancy is like 2 to 3 years with the form I had. And hey, it's almost 10 years now. So this is all gravy train time. And, you've been wonderful for me that way, because you've encouraged me to just keep on going and not worried about all that too much. So I haven't. And you also told me another.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you told me another.
I did that?
Yeah, you told me, and this is stuff, things, they stay with me sometimes. Every once in a while, I think my mind's like a steel sieve. Things get caught in it, but a lot of stuff just goes through. but I was talking about worry and about, worried about your health or worried about something. He said, oh, I don't know how good an idea it is to give a lot of attention to such things, because it gives them some power, and you don't need it. You don't need to bother with that. And I thought of, I don't know how I feel about that, but there may be something to that, because in some ways all of us are making this reality together somehow. Mm-hmm. And how the heck we're doing it, or why we're doing it this way, heaven knows. That's beyond my pay grade. And and so, but I do, in some moments I feel like I can see things, and there's no value to it, but when I feel like I can see it, I think, wow, I have a lot to do with this. And why the heck am I doing it this way? So, that's why paying attention to practice or paying attention to helping others is pretty nice work if you can get it, because it, you know, you don't have to worry about having trouble sleeping with that. Or, you know, you can say, like, you know, just like you're describing the people that are helping you with transportation, you know, like you're helping them, they're helping you. That's a pretty good, sweet deal. So, you know, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
When did you said you started practicing in '74?
Yes.
Can you give me a little rundown on that?
It's in kook.com, you know, this blog. But anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about how that happened. When I was a kid, I grew up on a farm in North Carolina, and my parents went to this church on Sunday, and I would hear things going on in the church, and I would think, this sounds fantastic. It'd be, why don't, you know, let's live like this and stuff. But it didn't seem to work out. But anyway, for some reason, as a child, I was always curious about what the heck's going on with this. And then I also was a voracious reader, and so by the time I got to high school, I had a philosophy class, and then I started reading, and in the philosophy class, it's philosophy and religion, and so there was some discussion about Buddhism. So I read everything. I read a book that really changed me, I think, was Houston Smith's Religions of Man, and I read this book, and there's a very short section on Buddhism, and an even shorter section on Zen Buddhism. It said, you know, an unusual, well, not unusual, I don't remember the wording, but it said a small sect of Buddhism where there's this idea that it would be possible to communicate with an understanding beyond human capacity, or something, some words like that. I can't remember exactly. But I thought, wow, something able to communicate with something or meet with something beyond human faculties. And I thought, well, that sounds good. So then I started
Where were you? Where did you grow up?
I was in North Miami. My parents had moved from the tobacco farm to in North Carolina to Miami, and I was there, living there. And then I was finishing high school, and I think I was getting ready to start my second year of junior college, and I was really enjoying reading about this because I started I think with Philip Kapleau's 3 Pillars of Zen, which probably gave me some bad ideas, or well, I don't know if they're bad ideas. My interpretations were not ones that were that help. I would say they would not be that helpful if I was talking to someone today, because I was all focused on the whiz bang aspect of this. Like there's an enlightenment you can get that is so awesome that, you know, you're done and you're changed forever and everything is worked out. And you know, and so I thought, you know, this is what I would like. But then I got another book, which was Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I read that, and I thought there was one story in there that I read. This guy, he said, I thought there's not that much whiz bang in here, but then I read this one vignette, this one story in there called The Waterfall, which you know very well. And but I read that and I thought, this is the most profound thing I think I've ever read. You know, of any
Nirvana, The Waterfall.
Yeah, this is like the most profound thing I've ever read. And I was so moved by it. I read it, and it was like I was moved. It was more than going to a movie and being moved, or reading some amazing passage. I was so moved by this, and I thought, well, okay, you know, there's not a lot of whiz bang here, but I need to find this guy, or I need to find these people, and I need to. This is obviously the real thing somehow. But anyway, you know, this is before the internet or anything else, and then when I
what year?
This was 73, and Suzuki was already dead. when I read the, I thought, well, I think I had read the story again after doing some more Zen reading. I was reading Paul Repp's Zen Flesh and Bones, but then I came back and I thought, well, okay, I need to get up with those people that are out in California that are doing this practice, because this still sounds like really the thing I want to try to do. So, but then I hadn't noticed in the Trudy Dixon introduction that Suzuki had died. And so, before the internet, I called out there and it's like, wow.
Wait a minute. Trudy died 2 years before he did.
That's right. I'm sorry. The introduction that mentioned Trudy Dixon dying and Suzuki dying. It wasn't just Trudy Dixon that had died.
Well, the book came out before he died.
Okay. But I didn't see
maybe then. Houston Smith's introduction, which only came with the hardback. Or maybe there was something changed after he died. But the book came out in 70, and he died in 71.
Okay. Well, it was Weatherhill was the publisher, I believe, the version I got. So, but anyway, I remember Trudy Dixon died, but anyway, then I called. So I'm embarrassing myself a little bit, but I called, and I did that when I called Zen Center. I called Zen Center and I said, I want to, I've read this book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and I want to come out and practice with Shunryu Suzuki. And he said, well, he's died. He's been dead for several years now. He's passed on. And I was just like, this is a long distance call. Like, we're talking now far away, but it's nothing for us these days. But then it's like, this is costing money, and I was living with my parents, and it's like, you're calling California? Why are you doing that? But anyway, but I was so taken aback. They did tell me, but the practice is still going on. It's very, very, a lot of practice still going on here and so forth. And so, but I was so flummoxed by my mistake that I hung up. Later on, though, I got my gumption back up, and I called back, and I thought, well, I really want to do this. Because I was working then at the Miami Herald as a copy boy, which doesn't exist anymore, I'm sure, but then it did, and we could copy out to the editors. But was saving up money. I bought a car, and I thought, well, I'm going to buy a car, and I'm going to see if I can convince them to let me come out and do Zen practice, and I'm going to get enlightened and then come back and, be hot stuff or something. And so I called and talked to them again, and this conversation was just about as bad as the first one, because they said, you can't come out here and practice. We don't have anything like that. We have people that can stay for 3 days or people that are residents, and that's it. There's nothing where you can come out and stay for a summer. And so I said, well, that's too bad, because I've saved up money hoping I could do that, hoping there was some way to do that. When I said I had money, that seemed to clink some bells or something.
Right. Listen, it only depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
You talk to one person, they say, well, we can work something out there. But you talk to another person, they'll be discouraging. It really just depends. It's like a roll of the dice who you get on the phone or whatever.
Well, anyway, once I said that, there was still another call, but it was, I would work this out, and I would pay half in advance or something like that. So yeah. I did that. I saved up, I had money saved, and then I was being deceptive in some fashion with my parents, that I hadn't let them know this, but then I had to let them know. Then it's like, okay, I'd already sent the money to Zen Center. I'd already planned, I'm going to plan a trip out where I'm going to spend the summer, before my second year of college, I'm going to be at San Francisco Zen Center for the whole summer. And I'm going to pay my way, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that all on my own and drive out there. And when I told my parents this, they just freaked out. It's like, this is in the Jonestown time and so forth. They said, oh my God, you're Denny, you're joining a cult, and you'll probably be killed or something. And then why would you ever do this? I thought You had a perfectly good religious upbringing, and why would you decide to do something so crazy? You know, and then it was, and I'm a pretty stubborn person, and so, but each night around the table at dinner, my father would, like, he'd stare at me, and it's like we'd stare at each other. It's like, when are you going to give up on this crazy idea? Of then said, not giving up on this idea to do that. Then finally it was, since I was working at Herald often on the night shift and I wasn't home at supper, then my father was berating my sisters and telling them they had to convince me not to do this, but they weren't able to succeed either. So, because I was stubborn. And so then I left and I drove out, I drove across the country. I was just a country boy from North Carolina living in Miami at the time, and seeing the United States, it was just kind of an amazing thing to see. What an amazing variety of landscapes and country and beauty that is this place. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but then I remember I got to Big Sur and I thought, wow, this California really is quite different. And I didn't realize how close I was to Tasahara, or, you know, but anyway, then I drove to San Francisco, and, you know, that's, the rest is kind of, I got there and they were surprised. You know, it's like, no one knew what to do with me. Like, finally they said, oh, because I had a receipt or something that I'd paid, and it's like, oh yeah, I guess so.
What did you pay for? It would have to be for a place.
Yes, I had a room.
Where? In the city?
In the city, I shared a room with, at first I was by myself for a short time, but then I was with Joe Cohen, who you would remember.
Sure. Oh, I remember Joe Cohen. Great guitarist.
And also sitar player. And, you know, there was no music.
Oh, right.
You could not play music, you know, you could not even whistle or sing or anything, but Joe got permission to play his sitar. So that was, you know, I always wondered.
I always had a guitar in my room at the city. I wrote a lot of songs there.
Good.
You don't pay attention to rules like that.
Well, I did. But anyway, I stayed with Joe Cohen, and Dan Welch was there, and he was acting leader or abbot at that point because Richard Baker was in Japan. And Dan was a pretty impressive person. You know, I've never seen him again since that summer, but he was such a I thought he was such a neat guy. And, you know, he rode motorcycles, and he was not he wasn't your moon-eyed, starry-eyed Zen person at all. He was, you know, I don't know. I don't, it's difficult for me to know what to say about him. He rode a motorcycle, and he was a pretty tough agent some way, and he didn't appear like he took guff off many people. And there was various things going on there, but because I was just a kid, I was 21 years old, I was assigned to Philip Whalen, who I didn't know was a famous person. And, you know, I told you this story, but I didn't know it was a famous person. I was just such a naive kid, David. I just didn't know. And I thought he's just a weird, curmudgeonly guy. And I never knew what he was going to say. And he would always say the strangest things to me. And then I worked in the bookstore for a while for him, and I worked in the kitchen and I was able to work with the bakers, and I was really impressed by the kitchen. But anyway, I think I had been there for like 3 or 4 days at Zen Center when I decided I really hated it. So didn't like it at all, and everybody, we were getting up way too early and sitting on zazen, and it's like this wasn't any fun. And you know, rather than the enlightenment experiences or Kinsho or something that I was expecting to have from reading Three Pillars of Zen, there was just like aching bones and body, and hurt and boredom and misery and various other things. So I think I'd been there like 3 weeks when I decided this is so not working that I'm not going to do what people are telling me to do. I'm going to do the reverse of what they're telling me to do in the Zen. I'm going to do what I call sabotage zazen. So it's like think all the thoughts you can and really hang on to them and plot revenge and have all the sexual fantasies you can think of that would have been good, either real or imagined. And same thing with ice cream, favorite for me, or so I do that. So I say, well, what's the day project? Oh, I'm gonna figure out what my life will be after I get back, or something. I have projects of things to think about, and so I go down there. But then after about a month and a half of that, I ran out of material, or I got bored with my material, and then it was just, I was like a bump on a log. Then I didn't know what to do, and but there's other stories. It would take too long for me to tell you. Whatever. I was thinking, there was a place called Hamburger Mary's.
Go on.
Hamburger Mary's. Do you remember that place? Well, anyway.
Of course I do.
Anyway.
Hamburger Mary's. Well, Hamburger Mary's, I would, when my gay cousin arrived there with his boyfriend in San Francisco, I drove them straight to Hamburger Mary's. I would drive people straight to Hamburger Mary's. It was a good introduction to San Francisco because it was one of those wonderful places that was a mix of gay people and straight people and different races.
Everything.
It was incredible.
Well, anyway,
yeah.
So the other thing I haven't told you is, at 21, I had this hot girlfriend. I don't know if I'm even allowed to say that in these days, but anyway, I thought she was. So, and the idea was I was going to go out to the Zen Center, and then when I was done with all that in September, she was going to meet me in Texas, and then, in my fantasies, it was going to be wild times there once we got together. So, anyway, that was the plan. And, but, while I was there too, there were a lot of really nice women there too, girls, or whatever I'm allowed to call them. But anyway, and their people were so nice there. People were so nice there. But anyway, they were saying, well, and there have been a lot of musical events going on, and they said, we're going to a session in Marin County soon, and it's going to be like a really great weekend to spend together. And then after the session's done, then we're all going to go to Hamburger Mary's. Now, where I was eating vegetarian food for the whole summer, and I thought, I said, you guys are going to go to Hamburger Mary's? It's like vegetarian hamburger. Oh no, this is real. This is a real hamburger place. This is not a vegetarian place. We wouldn't. And he said, and you've got a car? Because I did. I had a car, and so it's like, and we can drive in your car, and we can show you the way to go to Marin County to the session. And of course, the session wasn't Woodstock in Marin County. The session was the session. So, like I said, I was so naive then. It's hard to believe that a person like this could float, but I did. And so then I went with them, and we went to Marin County, and this was, I think, when Green Gulch was first being built, and we were going to sit for the weekend was the plan. And then when I realized we were going to sit this schedule, which was more than what I was used to at the city, even though we were sitting 2 periods in the morning, this was like me sitting all day. I thought, well, I think it was 3 days. I thought, well, okay, obviously I'm going to go crazy here for sure. I'm not going to be able to do this. And I thought, wow, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when I go crazy. And so I kept waiting for myself to go crazy, David. I thought, well, I wonder what it'll be like. And I thought, well, I'll probably just jump up from the Zafu and run outside and throw my hands in the air and say, I can't take it. And that'll be it. And I'll try to figure out how to get back to San Francisco or something. And but that never happened. And then the lunch came that day, and then after that came a cookie or something, and then there was sitting at night, there was dinner, and then I was dead tired, and there was 2 more days, and I did it, and then the whole thing was over, and I'd gone through, and I never went crazy the way I thought I would. But we went to Hamburger Mary's, and that was a pretty great memory I have.
You said that was when Green Gulch was first being built.
maybe.
Well, we bought Green Gulch early in 1972, and all the buildings were there.
Yeah.
But we were always fixing things up. So you were there in 74, huh?
Yeah, and what was happening when I was there was one building had been demolished, and we were when we went back to Hamburger Mary's, but the trucks brought back a bunch of floorboards that the nails are going to be removed, and we were going to, I think, put down planking over the floor of the Zendo to cover the black and white checkered pattern that was there. And my job
No.
Did I have that wrong?
Not the Zendo. The Zendo's still got the same floor. All we did with it was grind it down and smooth it out. It was.
But what were we removing these boards for? I wonder what we were doing that for, because.
Oh, well, for somewhere. I mean, we were always. I would get, like in 73 when I was there. I got. We tore down a whole building in San Francisco and took all the wood out to build things.
Well, anyway, my job was to remove nails. So I removed nails for days on end, and I confessed to Philip Whalen that in my Zazen I would sit there and there was just the sound of nails being pulled from wood over and over and over. He said,
"Nice."
He said, "I guess you'll have to do squeaky nails then." But anyway, great. So I'll finish this long story. I apologize, but
no, it's good.
At the end of it, of course, at the end of the summer, it was going to time to get ready to go back to Florida and meet the girlfriend. But then, of course, what you would expect to happen happened, which is she called and said she had met somebody else, and so was going to meet him. I think in New Orleans or something. But anyway, that was, my whole idea that there would be this great, wonderful payoff or something at the end. That was gone, and so I remember then I went.
I'm very sorry. Oh,
that's okay. There are various things I could tell you, but I won't tell you. But it's nice to appreciate the differences in the sexes to be a man. So, but anyway, I was very disappointed, and then I remember this very clearly, though, what I'm about to tell you. So I had lunch. I had good appetite then, still do. But I went into the kitchen and I got myself some lunch, and I sat down at the table, and the beautiful wood tables that are in the Zen Center there. And I was actually the one that's close by the windows, by the garden there. But I sat down and was having my lunch facing the kitchen doors there. And here comes Philip Whalen. He said, would you like some tea? And I said, oh, I didn't get some. He said, I understand that you're leaving. I said, yeah, I am. I was going to come up and tell you soon. He said, oh. He said, I'll be back with tea. And then he came back with tea, and he said, he sat down and he said, well, how's it been? And, for whatever reason, I was able to be honest with him, because with a lot of the people that were there that were practicing, I wasn't. It was just, I was a 21-year-old kid who thought a session was a rock concert rather than a session. And so I told him, I said, well, frankly, Philip, has been disappointing. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. It's been disappointing. Can you tell me how it's been disappointing? I said, sure. I had hoped to come out here and to get enlightened. And then he said, oh, I remember the way he did it. It was, he could just suddenly be really enthusiastic about something. And he said, oh, how'd that go? And I said, it hasn't gone well. It didn't go well. She said, what do you mean it hasn't gone well? And I said, well, I didn't get enlightened. And he looked at me and he said, you didn't get enlightened? Like that. And then he held out his fingers in front of me the way you would if you were telling someone with oryoki that you wanted just another small portion. He said, he held the fingers together, the thumb and the forefinger together. And he said, not even a little bit?
Oh, right.
I said, no, not even a little bit. And then he started chuckling and laughing like I had said the funniest thing in the world. And then he could see that I was embarrassed, I think, by that. And then he stopped laughing. Said, well, you'll always have trouble with patience. But what are you going to do after this? And I said, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to go back to Florida and go back to school. He said, no, I'm not talking about school. He said, I'm talking about this Zen practice. I said, Philip, you don't understand. There are no places doing anything like this in Florida where I came from. There's no places doing this. And what I didn't want to tell him is, why would I want to do this anyway? Because I decided I didn't like it. So he said, well, you could start something. And he said, you'll eventually be a teacher, I think. And I thought, wow, he really is crazy today. Because, anyway, he was prone to, there's a variety of stories about him, very unusual things he would say every once in a while, a lot of them haunting, and that would have kept coming back to me over time. But anyway, I didn't know what to say when he said that. He pretty much stopped me with that, and he got up, and then he said, well, thank you for being here. And then he bowed, and we bowed back to each other. I never saw him again. And, then... You
never saw him again?
Never saw him again. Because I left the following day. I left San Francisco's Zen Center, and I started driving back. And I camped because I had no money, so I was camping my way with canned goods and so forth to eat and back across the country. But in the camping things I did some walking as well as camping, and I realized I felt so wonderful. Camping and just being by myself, and I thought, wow, maybe my parents are right. Maybe this is a cult or something, because because then I wanted to sit zazen by myself, and I thought, this is so weird because I have decided I don't like this. And then I decided I'd lost confidence in what I believed that I wanted. And that was a really strange thing to feel that I'd lost confidence in my ability to know what I really wanted. But this desire to just keep sitting zazen stayed with me. And eventually I got back to Florida, and I'm not going to go further, but eventually, I think after a year or so, I did start teaching zazen to a night education class, because people were asking me about having done this, and I said, well, do you think you could teach us what you learned and what you did? So I was thinking, well, and I had gotten beyond deciding I hated it, because I was doing it by myself now, and no one was forcing me to do it. So I must be wanting to do it. So I shared that with people, and so I'm still doing that now, and it's a lot of years later now. So I took about an 8-year period off of not doing zazen and not doing practice, and that wasn't very good for me. I had problems. I started becoming quite bitter and skating the edges of alcoholism and so forth. And so I think you get to see by discontinuing something. Sometimes you get to see what it was doing. But anyway, I'll never quit it now. And it's been a wonderful thing for me. So I appreciate you allowing me to tell you all this. So
yeah, well, I want to know more. When you tell the story you just told me that you had to lodge out of my memory. I didn't remember it at first. And tell me when that happened.
I'm not sure it was 2003, David. I think it may have been.
Oh, right.
I think it may have been
That's
like
we've already.
2013 or something. So
Oh.
But anyway, you had.
Oh, 2013.
You with your sandals. There was something you had to do.
Dude, that's the year I came here.
No, well then that's wrong. Then it must have been 2000.
Well, I mean, I came here in December.
2012.
I wasn't at.
Yeah,
go on.
I can find the exact date because I got pictures. But anyway, the story is this: you had hurt yourself somehow with your foot, and but at the Suzuki Roshi Memorial, I'd been up to that when I was at Tassajara, and I was so happy.
Oh.
I was so happy to see you because usually I'd go there with Ed, and Ed wasn't going there, and I would usually go with somebody I knew. And that year, I wasn't going with anybody I knew, and I saw you there, and we just palled around. That's the way you would say it. We just palled around, and you know, I feel it's so easy for me to enjoy being with you. I really enjoy it, and so we were, you know, a sense of humor goes a long way with things, and so I really enjoyed that. But then, you know, I do get serious about certain things because I had been up to Suzuki Roshi Memorial. And at the memorial, I noticed that it was pretty unkept, and there was no water, and you know it's a long way to get water there. But things were just kind of a mess. And I came down to the cabin crew, talking to them about it, and I said, well, you know, they said, well, you know, we're short-handed. We don't really have people to work on that every day or you know every week or whatever it was that they were going to do. I said, well, can you give me a rake and some stuff and, you know, container and stuff, and I'll go up and take care of things myself. And would that be okay? So they decided that would be okay. And so I met you, and you said, well, you know, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, well, I'm going to go up to Suzuki Roshi Memorial and try to straighten it out. And he said, well, what, can I come? I said, sure. You can't think you can because you were, whatever you'd hurt, you were still hurting. And but
maybe it was plantar fasciitis.
That's what it was. It was associated with your foot. And so, and you said, I may have to go slow. And I said, that's okay. I don't go fast up there. So, but anyway, we just had the most marvelous conversations while I was with you there. Those few days that summer. And when we were walking up, there's the kind of a flat region, and then there's a pretty steep region, and there's a switchback just before the final steep section. And we stopped there for your foot and also to catch your breath. And you said to me, you said, you know, once I asked Suzuki if there was anything that could really help me with my practice. Is there anything that he could tell me that would really be helpful that he could tell me? And he repeated the story to me, and he said, yes, remember everything. And I started laughing on the trail. And of course, you know, because remember everything is tough duty, you know. And then later in years since, this story has really stuck with me because, you know, in some ways it's saying, like, you know, you do have to, if you're not going to pay attention to things, you'll be subject to where your attention was, and sometimes you'll pay attention and you'll still watch them go wrong, but at least you're watching it, you're noticing it. So, but I think Suzuki himself struggled with remembering things, and so you know, to me, this was kind of a way of making a little sweet fun with himself, as well as providing really good advice. And so this story is really stuck with me in that fashion. So I appreciate you telling it to me. And I may have the context wrong, but that's what I remember of what you told me. And we did get up there, and we made the Suzuki Roshi Memorial look primo when we left.
Oh, good, good. I was washing dishes then. Whenever I came in the summer, I'd try to come for 10 days, and I'd always get the job of washing guest dishes, which wasn't a job. It was something that the dining room did. But they were always happy to have me come do that because that meant that it was like giving them an extra person, you know. So I always got that. And they'd always, because I had seniority and stuff, they'd always let me do that. I never wanted to do anything else.
I remember that you've
Once,
always been.
one summer, I arrived there, and I was always worried, because the change of personnel. They say, no, you're going to do what we tell you to. The dining room person said, no, we don't need anybody. We do that ourselves. And so I went, okay. So I was cleaning cabins, which I didn't want to do, but it was all right. I get into whatever. And then somebody came and said, David, that they want you in the dining room. And that person had been told, hey, you idiot. you know, they might have said, well, this is what he always does, or something like they might have had a nostalgia Zen trip. But I think most likely they said, don't you realize that gives us another person that we can't get otherwise?
And also
okay, I want to go back. Huh?
Skill level.
Right.
So I would work as for the Fukuten in the kitchen. They would put me at various things, but usually if I stayed at Tassajara for several days, the kitchen crew, the Tenzo would say, or the Fukuten would say, could you give this guy back again? Because if you're used to chopping and cutting and doing things, then they're just like everybody else. It's important to be flexible and be able to do whatever, but you need people that know what they're doing. It's useful to have them. So
Katrinka was asked to be a summer guest cook.
Well,
Katrinka, my wife,
yeah.
we were there, and she worked in the kitchen. Well, she's a lifelong restaurant, hotel person, and she loves to cook. And she's very mature and focused, and she's not neurotic at all. And they asked her to come back and be probably not head guest cook, but a guest cook for this summer. And she couldn't do it, Hey, so wait a minute. You went back to Florida, and you were involved there with sitting with other people that just sort of evolved because there wasn't anybody there teaching Zen or anything. When did you reconnect with Zen Center and with Ed and this and that? I just wanted to get a broad picture of your Zen history that brings you to now.
Well, I had there was an 8-year period, as I mentioned, where I wasn't doing Zen practice. And I mentioned how that didn't work out so well for me. I think nearly forced during that time. But anyway, I was still working for the University of Florida, and there was in this business of doing energy work in buildings. And so there was a project that World Bank was doing in Thailand, looking for the Electrical Generation Authority of Thailand, where they wanted someone who was expert on cooling use in buildings, and Thailand's a very hot place. So they asked if there was somebody at the place where I work at Florida Solar Energy Center who knew a lot about that. And they pointed to me, and I was connected to some other people, and then I worked for 2 springtime periods, which are the hot season there. and I worked there. And then while I was there, they had another person they had hired to work in the same area. His name was John Bush, who was he was a research scientist at the Orange Berkeley National Laboratory. And while I was there, all the Thai people were saying, "Oh, I wonder what Dr. Bush will think. I wonder what Dr. Bush will think," because he did his dissertation on how Thai people stayed comfortable in Thailand, a very hot place. But anyway, so finally, in I think the second summer I was there, I met John Bush, and we became really fast friends right away. I mean, he was just a completely interesting, bright, funny, magnetic person. But anyway, he said, "Well, have you had a Thai massage yet?" And I said, "No, I'm kind of afraid of that because of all the sexual things and so forth going on associated with that." He said, "Oh no, we find the legitimate stuff," and and he spoke Thai, and he said, "You got to do that. You got to you got to do that." And so we.
Well, you got to do what? I didn't understand.
You got to get a Thai massage. You got to go and get a good Thai massage.
Oh yeah, no. There's good Thai massage. It's pretty rough if you get the really good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, we went and I remember we were in this room, and it's supposedly a really good one, and there were two women. They were giving us this massage, and we were lying there for a while, and then finally I said, "Hey, John," I said, "this interests me. This woman's kind of hurting me." And then then he said, "Yeah, this one's hurting me too." and then then later on, I said, "She's hurting me a lot now." He said, "Yeah, me too."
Yeah.
Said, "I'll say something." So he did blah 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 blah, and he said something, and so then it kept on, and then I said, "John, it's still going on. It seems like it's getting worse." He said, "Mine too." And he said, he said, "I think it's just cheeseburger. It's like the old Saturday Night Live joke with John Belushi. There's, you can say you want it one way, but you just get it that way." And so, but anyway.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. So he was saying this is the way it is for these women. But at the end of this, felt pretty relaxed, and John was saying, John was teaching me. He taught me yoga, which I'd never done before. Doing some yoga, and he said, you should really try. I'm trying Zen meditation now. I'm trying that. I said, I told him about having done Zen meditation and Zen practice for years. He said, "That's funny." He said, "That's interesting." He said, "I'm doing it with this guy out at in Sausalito, near Sausalito, Ed Brown." I said, "Ed Brown?" I said, "I remember Ed Brown. He was at San Francisco Zen Center, and when I was there in '74, if it's the same one, I can't imagine there'd be another one." So he said, you should try Zen meditation. I'm doing Zen meditation with this guy, Ed Brown, near Sausalito. Maybe you want to try that. I said, "Ed Brown, I remember him from San Francisco Zen Center in 1974. And I said, "I can't imagine there's another one." He said, "Well, yeah, you should come out and visit me, and we'll go, because he has like an all-day program. It's pretty nice, and I've done it several times. And I really like it." So I think this was 1991. And I went there with him, and I sat with Ed, and it's in the most important point in the introduction. I sat there, and I was just in tears. I was so I felt like I had the prodigal son or something. So I had finally come home, and I felt so warm and happy to have.
What year was that?
I think it was like 92 or 3. So, but I was so moved by it, and then I, started every opportunity. I was going to doing events with Ed, and then going to Tassajara and seeing Ed there, and I became pretty serious about practice pretty pretty fast. And then I think I was at Tassajara. This was in the, when was this? In the mid-'90s or late '90s. And I told Ed, I said, I've decided it'd be useful to have a teacher. And so that's not working out for me. I'm not really taking anybody on these days. It was kind of like, the response you'll get from literary agents, which, like, I'm not taking anybody.
Right.
I'm not taking anybody on. Sorry. And but he said it's not worked out well for me or for them, and I didn't really know what he was talking about with that. But I was pretty insistent, and so I didn't plead with him, but it was close to it. I said, well, I can be a pretty understanding person, and maybe I'm not that hard, but I feel like I get along with you okay, and I feel comfortable in asking you things I'm embarrassed to ask other people. And that's a big advantage in life, when you can be yourself, when you can expose your worst parts, or the parts you're most embarrassed about, or what have you. That's a big advantage in anything, when you can have a relationship where you can just say, I'm like that, and that you don't feel judged. And I never felt judged by it. Never felt like he was judging me. So he took me on, and I got lay ordination. I think in 2004 or 3 or 4, and then a priest ordination in 2011, and still going. So like I said, I'm happy just to have been able to run into this. For a longest time, I felt really embarrassed about what I call my lack of skill at being a priest, but I've given up on that because it's evidently not helpful to others to hear that, including me. And so I've received lectures from several people on that, so I have to listen to them. But I am repeating it to you just to let you know that I'm aware that I tend to self-deprecate this way, and it's not helpful. So, but
well,
anyway.
It's better than you can swing the other way too, and be arrogant and pompous. It's better to be self-deprecating than that, I think.
Well, one of the things I've seen is within this practice, you do see that as a human being, you have the freedom to be. You have a huge responsibility in terms of how you're going to live this life, and it's up to you.
Yeah.
And once you realize that, it's a big thing, and you can decide, I'm going to be arrogant. You can make that decision, or you can decide I don't really care. I don't really care what others think or whatever. But Zen practice is to see that you really do have this kind of profound choice about such things. And like I said at the beginning, I feel like for me, taking careful care of the things that you encounter in your orbit, that tends to show me that my competence is limited. How's that?
Yeah. So you became this expert on energy and all that. How did that happen? I mean, you sort of went from dropping out of school to being, advising the European Union and Thailand about energy problems and stuff like that. I mean, just what? Obviously, you studied something and got a degree.
Well, I think part of it. I've always loved science and machines, so I should say that I've always loved that. And when I was a kid on the farm, my favorite uncle, we lived 12 miles from any town that had any library, and there was a bookmobile that would come by once a week, and he would order books on the bookmobile from the bigger library, the things that I was interested in, like the stars and space. I love space and the stars, and I love rockets and planes and jet engines and all engines and motors, but especially things that flew. I love them. And so he encouraged me to, once you love something, it loves you back. Like I've been joking about it, it's true. So I learned to love machines, and also too, I liked studying kind of the minute processes and things happening in the world, how things were working relative to stuff, and living in houses, moving from North Carolina, where at that time we had a real winter and we had a real summer too, but in Florida when we moved there, it's like a really hot place. And so I was very interested in that, like why is it so hot in this house versus the house we were in, and does it have to be this way? And I would think about this even as a kid. And so when the energy crisis came in 1974, the oil crisis happened, I thought, well, this probably is going to be something we're faced with for the rest of my life. And it hasn't been exactly, but in some ways it has been, because now we can still find enough stuff to burn, but we shouldn't burn it because it's ruining the atmosphere. And I was very interested in the planets then when my uncle brought me books from the bookmobile. And I was so fascinated to find that Venus seemed like it was closest and looked like it would be the best opportunity to be like Earth. It was like 800 degrees or something, because
that's right.
A huge
it's hotter than Mercury. It
has like this carbon dioxide atmosphere.
Right.
And it's just a noxious place. But anyway, so so in some ways, I think like my interest in that has that's come around. Why it's not that we can't find oil to burn. It's just that we shouldn't burn it. And we should stop burning everything, really. The amount of stuff we burn, we should really go down in what we burn. It's very simple. But anyway, in studying buildings, I became interested in that. And I thought, well, I think I really would be interested in this. And so in 1977, I had a professor at Florida International University, and he said, the best way to learn things are with experiments. And so we had these side-by-side mobile homes that we set up to look at how having shade trees might influence air conditioning needs. And we actually planted fast-growing trees around one of the main mobile homes, and then put in instrumentation so we could measure this. And I was absolutely fascinated by this. And I worked on that with him for a year and a half, and we eventually ended up publishing something, and I was really fascinated by it. And I told him when I was finished with my 4 years at Florida International University, I told him, he said, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to graduate school? You should go to graduate school. You're a smart kid. And I said, yeah, I'm definitely going to go to graduate school. I want to study energy use in houses. He said, what?
There you go.
He said, you're crazy. I said, there's no such thing. You should get a degree in chemistry or engineering or something. So that's a crazy idea. I said, well, it's what I want to do. And he said, besides, Florida is really not a good place to be studying this. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, Florida is just a minute part of the United States, and this climate has nothing to do with what it's like in Michigan, or I think he had gone to school in Ann Arbor. I paid attention to that. So I applied to graduate schools, and I went to the coldest one that would accept me. I went to the University of Montana, which is, I can still remember the numbers that I looked up. When I looked them up in the 70s, it had 7,931 heating degree days, that means it's a ferociously cold place, which I found out living there. But I learned by living there, it's just like by immersing yourself in something, you learn about that if you survive it. And, I learned that, I learned what houses are like in really cold weather. I had grown up in a place where houses were in mixed weather, summer and winter, and then I live now and have lived in a place where it's really hot weather. And so when you experience all three of these, then you kind of have the gamut of the circumstances that you're faced with on the planet. And so that served me well in my career. That's how that's all happened. And I came, I went to graduate school, and then I got a job at the Northwest Power Planning Council in Portland, Oregon after that, studying something called Model Conservation Standards, how to make buildings efficient in the Pacific Northwest. And I did that. And then they wanted to hire me at Pacific Northwest National Labs in Battelle, but they were in Richland, Washington, and they took my wife, Lisa, and I out there to romance us, to convince us to move there. But she told me she would divorce me if we went there. So, because it's a place in the desert in Richland, Washington, where they built the nuclear pile that was just built above ground, and I think Fat Boy.
Oh, near Hanford.
Yeah, Hanford. They have a problem with radioactive tumbleweed there. But anyway,
oh yeah.
But anyway, it's not so I finally got offered a job here in Florida, and we came in 1988, and I've been here since. And so that's a long time. I've been here a long time, and I'm still, Lisa says I'm interested in anything, and that's about right.
That brings me to the next question. You've written 3 books on World War II?
Yeah, I've written books on World War II, and now I was telling Ed, I said, now that war is chasing me. So when I wrote the most important point, I was able to I stopped with anything associated with the war, and I was able to just work on that book and then my regular day job. And it was so delightful to leave Nazi Germany behind, because I had, for some reason, again, as a kid, I became interested in what happened in World War II. How did this happen? Because that had happened, I was born in 1953, so it happened just 10 years before I was born, and then 20 years before I was a kid. And so it was kind of a big story in that time. And you and I grew up in a time where, now we have COVID pandemic problems, but then you were worried about being blown up in a nuclear blast, and we would scurry under tables, and it was really terrifying,
the nuclear threat is greater now than it was then, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's probably right. That's probably
much more substantial. It's really big. Yeah.
But it was really big.
And people don't realize that.
Yeah, I think we're in a very dangerous time, and there's a beautiful story by Katagiri that Katagiri relates about that. I'm not going to do that tonight, but it's about a pond that survived in Hiroshima. But anyway,
come on, outline it.
Well, the outline is, of course, thousands of people died in the flesh, and the place was burned hideously, and there was an old, what's kind of nettle tree it was, a special kind of nettle. They live a very long time, these trees, Chinese nettle tree. But anyway, it had been burned to a crisp by the elementary school. It's near a shopping mall in Hiroshima, and it was kind of put on parade or left there as a stark reminder that this happened, that this place was burned like this, to take a nettle tree like this and just turn it into an ugly black skeleton. And there was this man who was I can't remember his name right now, but he was a tree whisperer. He was a tree doctor, but he was a special kind of doctor because he said that he could communicate with trees by just touching them. And ever since I first went to Zen Center, when I left that summer, I came back, I had the most eerie experience of feeling like that pine trees were talking to me somehow or something. And not talking like in English, but just some kind of communication. But I had this eerie feeling that there was something special about pine trees. But anyway, and that's still neither here nor there. But in this story, this doctor, he went to this famous little monument near this place in Hiroshima, and he touched the tree and he said, "This tree isn't dead; it's still alive." This is like in 1984.
Yeah.
They said, "How do you know?" And I said, "I can feel it. It's still alive. It's gone dormant. It's almost dead, but it's gone completely dormant because it's hiding because it was so hurt." And he said, I can probably bring it back to life if you want. Do you want?" So then, as the way it would be in Japan, there had to be a committee that was going to study this to figure out whether it would be okay for him to try this. But they decided, yeah, let him try it. And then he came and he repotted it, added nutrients around its roots, and sprayed things on the charred sections of the tree or whatever. And then he did this for like 2 days or whatever. And then he didn't have much to say to people. And he just said, "It'll grow new shoots in the spring." And then he left. And it did. It came back to life. So the children of the school there, they've written a little commentary on this since it came back to life. It only lived about another 10 years after it came back to life. And I like to think this is also quite profound, because even if we preserve our life, there's a limit. And, like, especially in my case with stem cell transplants, I've had 2 of them to extend my life, and probably that's it. So you extend your life, or you can extend the life of something like that, but, it's good enough. There's enough life. There's enough life to have for it to be good enough. But when you and I, yeah, it is. But when you and I grew up, there was this, there was a big danger of the war, and then the way the war ended with atomic weapons, it was enough to make you think. And I was thinking, like, how the hell did this happen? And then, all the stories about millions of people being gassed and so forth. And how do people decide to do this? And then Japanese people that, in the 60s, I was learning, what beautiful things had come out of this culture and so forth. How did that happen? And then how do we decide to drop bombs on them to end it and everything? And so, but anyway, I was really fascinated with the war, and I started again, as Lisa said, I can be interested in everything. I love chess. I had taught myself to play chess I think when I was 12 or something, and I had a good friend, and for Christmas one year, he gave me a game that said it was like chess, only more interesting, more fun or something. It was called the Battle of the Bulge, about the Battle of the Bulge, and it said it was absolutely authentic game. And my friend and I tried to play this thing. It was very hard to play, but when we played it, it was impossible for whoever was the Americans to win. And they just couldn't even stay on the coffee table. And I thought, well, what the heck happened with here? And because it happened in the last few months of the war. So as we want to do, I went to the library, and we had a really nice library in North Miami. And I got books about this, and I read them. And I thought, well, wow, these books are wrong somehow, because this doesn't seem at all like that game. And then finally I realized the books were agreeing with each other. They were not agreeing with this game. And I wrote this long letter to the publisher. I think the name of the publisher was Avalon Hill Company, telling them what seemed to be perhaps wrong with this game. And, I was a precocious kid, David. What can I say? I think it was like a 10-page letter or something like that typed. And I never heard from them, of course. But I was contacted
Oh.
years later by a guy who started a new company in New York called Simulation Publications. He said, well, my name is Jim Dunnigan, and I work for Avalon Hill. I work for that company. I'm no longer there, but I got your letter. And he said, we want to do an accurate game on that. And he said, would you be interested in doing that? And I was like a young kid at that point. And I thought, I don't know.
How young? How young?
16 or something,
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, I wouldn't know how to do that. You'd need access to the original sources. I'd read these books, but you'd need access to the original sources, and they're in Washington, D.C., the National Archives, or they're in Germany at the archives there, or in England at the archives there. And he said, well, we can arrange an expense account for you to go back and forth to Washington or New York here where I am, but we can't afford for you to go to Germany or England, but we can get a researcher to look for things for you there, whatever we can hire them. And I was just a kid of 16, and it's like, wow, I could have an expense account to go to Washington. So anyway, I went to meet him, and I think he did not know that, he was hiring
your
a kid.
age.
He was hiring a kid. I'd never been to New York.
Oh.
I was just agog. It's like, I got a cab, had a hotel. I mean, it was pretty amazing. But then his clerical assistant, she looked pretty surprised. She asked me who I was, and I said, well, I'm Danny Parker. And it's like, oh, Mr. Dunnigan, Mr. Parker is here to see you. And anyway, it was one of those events in your life, but it's pretty funny. But he didn't skip a beat. He was totally confident. He said, you think you could do this? And I said, well, I'm still in school, but I can take summers off and work on it. So I did. I took the summers off, and I worked at the National Archives, or I read all this material, and I learned a lot about the Battle of the Bulge, a lot. And again, as Lisa says, I can become interested in anything. So I studied this, and eventually I was contacted by this man. His name was Charles McDonald, and he was the chief of the office of the Chief of Military History in Washington, and he had left there, and he was writing a book about the Battle of the Bulge. And George Wagner, who was one of the archivists there at the National Archives, he sent me a letter saying, would you mind if we let McDonald know about you, because he wants to look at the archives, but I told him that there's this kid who spent summers looking at them that knows them better, at least for the Battle of the Bulge, than anybody. And I said, sure, he can contact me. So he contacted me, and one thing led to another, and I helped him with this and that. And he said, I'm leading a tour over in Belgium. Would you like to help with the tour? And by this time, I was considerably older. This was after going to Zen Center and coming back and all the rest. But so I did tours over there, and then a publisher asked me, because I had collected all this material, I did work for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because they had their own war game called Force M. And Force M, as far as I know, still exists. But one of the problems with Force M, when you have a really complicated computer game, is you need some validation to make sure it works right. And you need like they wanted to simulate a big land battle where a really powerful enemy attacks you, and then how well do you do, i.e. Soviet Russia versus NATO forces. And by the way, that's a big danger right now, as Trump is trying to reduce strength levels in Europe because Putin wants him to. But anyway.
That's right. That's right. You're absolutely right. And, that's true.
Anyway,
Go on.
So Force M, they need to validate it. The best way to validate it was to have a known battle that was like the one that they were worried about in Europe, where the Russians attack and the Soviets attack in overwhelming strength against NATO forces. And so the big validation would be, let's see how Force M works on the Battle of the Bulge. But it was like any model, you need it's garbage in, garbage out. You have to have good data going in. So, so the work that I did at the archives, we did even more work, and much more detailed work at the Bundesarchiv in Freiburg, Germany, to get information on German forces. So anyway, very detailed information on numbers and troops and equipment, tanks and guns and fuel and everything. And our job was, and there was a bunch of people working on this. The job was to prepare this for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I did that work. And while I was in graduate school in Montana, because I was desperately poor, and they were willing to pay an outrageous amount of money. If you're in graduate school and you're working as a teaching assistant or research assistant, you're not getting much money. But these guys at the Pentagon, they were really willing to pay lawyer money for doing this kind of work. So I did that. And then I was contacted by a publisher saying, we understand that you've done all this work for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and you've done this work with McDonald and all these other things. You think you could? Because I already written a lot of stuff up, and so they could see I could write some. And so they asked me to write a book, and so I wrote a book called The Battle of the Bulge that came out in 1991, and we just always called it the Golden Guide to the Battle of the Bulge, because it's like a big coffee table type book with a lot of pictures and short vignettes about all kinds
Your book is called
The Battle of the Bulge.
Say
The Battle of the Bulge.
But then you said the Golden Guide.
Oh, my wife calls it that. She calls it the Golden Guide.
Oh. The
Golden Guide to the Battle of the Bulge, because it's, the Golden Guides were, they were detailed, but not too detailed. And I'm going to get the actual title here for you so I have it right. It's called Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's Ardennes Offensive, 1944 to 1945. And anyway,
What was that? Wait a minute. Would you say the subtitle again?
Yes, the title was The Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's Ardennes Offensive, 1944 through 1945. And it was published...
Go on.
Go ahead. It was published in 1991. And and my wife called it the Golden Guide to the Battle of the Bulge because it was only about 200 pages or so, and lots of pictures and lots of short little articles. Actually, it's 300 pages. But so anyway, I did that, and then one thing led to another. I knew Charles McDonald during that time, and I was working on this book, and he said, well, this is during one of the tours, he said to me, we were drinking scotch one night, and he said, if you really, he had been working on this book on the Battle of the Bulge himself called A Time for Trumpets. He said, I've realized that there's this one personality. I think if you could understand him, you could understand the whole war on the German side. And I said, who's that? And he said, this guy, Jochen Peiper. And he said, I think if you could understand what happened there, you could understand everything. And I never forgot that. And I started looking into him, and I thought, well, he's right. This guy, really unusual personality. And the more I learned about him, the more I realized that was true, that he was a person that if you could understand him, you could understand how the war had happened on the German side. So I need to pause just a moment here.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So that's...
Well, wait a minute. You got to tell me something about him.
Okay.
Other than you understand everything through him. I don't know a single thing about him.
Yeah, okay. I'll tell you some things about him. So this man was, he was from Berlin. His father had fought in the war, in World War I. Very, you would say right-wing or conservative family or whatever, but he joined the Waffen-SS in 35, and he rose through the ranks quite quickly there. He's a very smart, well-educated person. He was well-read. He read a lot. He spoke languages, and he also came to the attention of Heinrich Himmler when Himmler was on the rise in Nazi Germany. And Himmler took an immediate shot to him, and then he became Himmler's adjutant, his aide-de-camp in 1939. 1938, before the outbreak of the war. And he was with Himmler through 1941. So he was with Himmler during the genesis, the build-up for not only, the build-up for the elimination camps, but the concentration camps were already, a lot of them were already constructed and built, and they were putting people in them. And we see what's going on now, like the big news in the last 24 hours is that Trump is congratulating China on, we know you need to have those things, concentration camps to keep people.
Right.
This is a road once you go down, there's no end to it. But, or it's a bad end. But anyway, so Piper was a witness to all this, and he was witness to the inside track of what was going on with Himmler. And since he was Himmler's aide-de-camp, he was like he was like the small guy at all the big events and occasions. He was there. He was at the Nuremberg party rallies. He was with Himmler soon after the Night of the Long Knives. He visited all these concentration camps with Himmler. He saw what was going on. Even if he didn't go to the elimination camps with him, the latest book that I've done on him, it opens with him going to Auschwitz, to Birkenau, with Himmler to determine if it's going to be right for the new project. And that's how that book starts. The new book is called Piper's War. It's about the war years for this guy.
So that was the second book you wrote?
I've written on him. I've now written 3 books. And the most recent one just came out. It's called Piper's War. So I've written 3 books.
On him?
Yeah, on him. On him and the various things associated with his life. I wrote, this is all, David, it's all a book that was all written now more than 10 years ago, finished. But it was like...
Well, just give us the names of the book.
Okay, the first one's called Fatal Crossroads, about the Malmedy Massacre, and this is the event that almost led to his death after the war, where 84 Americans were shot down after surviving in the Battle of the Bulge on the second day of that battle. They had surrendered to German forces and were gunned down near a small town called Malmedy in Belgium. And that book is called Fatal Crossroads, and that came out in 2011. Another book about Piper before the war and after the war, which I think is the most interesting book, really. It's called Hitler's Warrior, and that came out in, 2014 or 15, I can't remember. But anyway,
is that right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
And then
That's just amazing.
Then the most recent book just came out in the last few weeks. It's called...
What do you mean, a 4th book?
That's a 3rd book. So, the first one I told you about, the Battle of the Bulge, that's not included in Piper's stuff. That's just a book I wrote about the Battle of the Bulge.
All right, the Battle of the Bulge, and then, all right.
And then there's 3 books about Piper, and there'll be a final one. And
there'll be a 4th book about him.
Yeah, and that's the quadrilogy. There'll be 4 books, and the final book is about Piper in the Battle of the Bulge, in the Ardennes Offensive. And all this stuff was written more than 10 years ago, and it's about 3,000 pages that were written that are just being carved up. That's what I'm doing now.
I see. What happened to him? He survived the war, huh?
He survived the war, and but he was tried at Dachau in 1946 for the Malmby massacre, because he had led the troops that shot those 84 Americans down. He was sentenced to death at Dachau. And the U.S. Army, in their strange way of doing things, they hired people as investigators that were somewhat unscrupulous, not so different from the recent experiences that we've had at Abu Ghraib or something like that. But anyway, and then they also hired a civil defense U.S. Army attorney who had no experience with criminal law at all to defend him. And they told him that the fact that he would not be able to defend this guy would not be held against his career. But they chose the wrong guy, because the man they chose, Willis Everett, was kind of a champion of the little guy, and for whatever reason, he decided that he was devoted to trying to protect these men that were on death row, and so he got him off in 1951. The death sentence was repealed, and he was released from prison at Landsberg in 1956. And then he worked for Porsche in Germany. And then and Porsche had built, some of the tanks that he had been used during the war and so forth. And so it was a very strange business about what happened after the war. So that second book I think is actually the most interesting book, because it describes his life after the war. And then he was murdered on Bastille Day in 1976. He retired to a quiet, sleepy hillbilly town in eastern France. And the reason I decided to publish these books was actually because I thought that was the story that was really the interesting story. It was, old SS guy gets killed.
By whom?
Yeah, by who? Because the Dijon police weren't able to solve the murder. So I thought, well, maybe I can solve it. And in that case, I have a whodunit about a bad guy and a bunch of other things. And so I went and interviewed a bunch of people in eastern France to try to figure this all out, as well as the police inspector that was in charge of the case. And he's no longer living, but that, I could go on and on this, but I did figure out actually what happened, but then I decided that there was no advantage in reviewing this because some of the people are still living. So, it just becomes an interesting thing, but
what happened?
He was in the war. He was famous for burning down towns and wherever he was, and the story was, if you saw smoke on the horizon, that's where Piper is, because he was burning towns down, and this is the way he did it. But anyway, he was burned to death in this tiny town of Troyes, France, on Bastille Day in 1976. And so Hitler's Warrior is about, it's kind of a book within a book. It's a book about his life in retirement in this tiny town, and then his life before the war and after the war. So that's, I actually think, of the things I've worked on that I've written, I think the most important point is the most important book. But on the other hand, on books about the war, Hitler's Warrior is, I'm still quite proud of that. I think it's a pretty good book.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's how all this has happened. So
wow, that's a great story. The whole thing, everything. Do you know why I called you?
No,
you don't.
No, we don't. You said you had something else you had to talk to me about.
Yeah, 2.5 hours ago.
Yeah.
And that is that. But, dear listener, we're going to spare you the next 25 or so minutes of Danny and me talking, But I will tell you what I was asking him. I wanted to embark on another project of going over all of Suzuki's lectures and sort of, there's so many little changes and fixes and things to do, and uh, create we have a number of what we call light edits, but there's many, 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 many that haven't been done. There's some of them that have nothing but the verbatim version, which, a lot of people prefer it, but some people find it rather tedious. So, and then there's some that have a nicely edited version, like for the wind bell, but nothing in between. So I asked him if he'd like to be involved with the project doing that. And I just don't have time. I said I just keep wanting to get to it, but I just don't have time to do it. But I can work with a team. We've got Peter, my associate, I call him, who's been working with me for 10 years and does a great deal. And Peter and I can lend support. And then Danny just right away. I knew, you want to get something done, ask a busy person. That's an old adage, right? Right away said yes. And right away said he would ask a woman named Sally who worked with him on Ed Brown's book if she would join us on Ed Brown's books. So now we're on for that. And Peter and I have done some consulting back and forth and sent them some notes and suggestions. We've had some discussion there. Just wrapping up. He had to do a paper for a conference on energy conservation. That's a virtual conference. And they're wrapping up some work with Ed Brown lectures. And so maybe we'll have a more up-to-date, corrected, accessible, easy-reading version of all of Shunryu Suzuki's lectures. Some of them are sort of beyond redeeming in that you can't understand enough in the audio, but I think we can spruce up a lot of it and make it a lot smoother reading. Anyway, that's what we talked about. I was very pleased that he was interested, and I hope that works out. And now we return to the last seconds of the phone chat with Danny.
It's been so great talking with you, and I'm so happy you're out there doing all this. And I'm happy you're my friend. So, well,
this is great. This has been great.
I hope to see you again somehow in this life. So we'll see if that works. But
well, come to Bali. I have no plans on leaving.
Yeah, I've got a feeling you're going to be there. I told Lisa, my wife, I said, David Chadwick called, and she said, "Oh, is he?" And he's not. I thought he had left. I said, "Yes, he's in Bali." He said, "That would be a nice place to be." And I said, "I bet he would let us come if we wanted." So.
Oh yeah. Okay,
I'll let you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Good night.
Hey, that's been great. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Blessings.
You take care. So thanks a lot, Danny Parker. That was great. Hey, been a busy guy. Quite impressive, quite impressive. Say, I just checked Amazon.com and see how hard it was to find Danny's books. I just wrote Danny Parker, and they all lined up. There didn't seem to be another Danny Parker. Pretty good. There's other David Chadwicks. And you think Danny Parker sounds like a more common type name. But maybe, maybe they've got some algorithm or something that did that just for me. Anyway, a number of the books about Piper and the Battle of the Bulge book and the book of Ed Brown's lectures, The Most Important Point, they all lined up right there. So go check it out, huh? And after you do that, we invite you to the homepage of cuke.com, cuke.com, and tap on one of the donate buttons on top or bottom, or there's one on the Cuke Audio Podbean page. That takes you to the donate page for Cuke Archives and Cuke Audio, and it's really easy from there to see how to send a check or make a little contribution through PayPal or become a PayPal subscriber for as little as $1 a month. So this has been another Cuke Audio Phone Chat. I'm your host, DC, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita and Feline Cuchita. And soon, we hope, dear Katrinka will land. And we're all wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.